Now let me ask you this. It appears that at every turn, municipal planners, and this is not specific to Denver, but there is this new urbanism push where we build high-density homes right around light rail stations, and the effort is to get people to move there, get businesses to relocate there, and yet we have this policy which says we are moving toward low-density development. Yeah. So is there a contradiction there, or is there any sort of consistency?
Absolutely. Everybody loves density until it comes to their own neighborhood.
That would seem true. If you look at Lowry, certainly a lot of the first families that moved into Lowry are now moving out because they liked the idea at first of having the beaver cleaver, and it is beautiful, but being so close to your neighbors and having the alleys and the front porch. But after a while, maybe you want to go out in the front yard and get your newspaper and your boxers or whatever else and not have a neighbor that's 5 feet from you. So that is part of the concern.
You know, that's the marketplace too. If people, if they want to buy, they don't. If fine. If they don't, they don't have to. But it's amazing some of the things that I've heard at some of these neighborhood meetings. I heard one recently, one woman stood up and said if they want to build those large homes, they can move the hell to Highlands Ranch. Wow. Well, I'm concerned when people make statements like that, because with new families moving into Denver now that we have neighborhood schools, there's a direct relationship between the number of larger homes that we offer and the advance, in my judgment, of our public schools. And I can point specifically to neighborhoods in my district where the local elementary school has flourished because of the advent of new homes. And families do not want, no offense, Mike lives in a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house. That's not for the modern family.
And Mike's the first one to say that. But let me ask you about this. This is pretty controversial. You're saying that the quality of a public school is directly proportional to the, not direct, only partially proportional to that neighborhood's ability to provide larger homes. So you're saying good schools come through having wealthy families, and a lot of people would say that's racist, that's classist, because you're saying that we can't have good schools without having rich people there.
I'm talking about infill, people who are moving from the, the suburban areas of Denver, moving into Denver, into new homes, and then they're not going to move into a one. Generally speaking, as a former realtor, I've seen it. They're not going to move into a 1-bath, 2-bedroom home. It just doesn't fit the lifestyle.
There's a significant demographic shift going on in the United States right now from and in the 1950s, when a lot of the single-family zoning came about. It was designed to, it drove people out into the suburbs, which, and I have nothing against suburbs because they have provided a version of the American dream to a great many people. But there's a demographic shift going on now where people are coming back into urban core neighborhoods, young families, childless couples, that's my wife and I, and empty nesters. And I got news for you. The only way that we could afford to live in our neighborhood was to buy what's euphemistically called a fixer-upper. Right?
Well, I bought a fixer-upper too, and we moved from Arvada to Denver, so we're right there with you.
You're in an urban core neighborhood. But quite frankly, the truth of the matter is that no family with any kind of financial options would ever live in our house. It's just too small. And a family that lacks those financial options couldn't afford to live in the Berkeley neighborhood anyway. And so once we're downzoned, we basically lost our options to sell our house. And so, my great concern about this downzoning is not that it's going to happen, but, and I'll give you an example. Oddly enough, for the last 50 years, accessory dwelling units have not been allowed in Denver. So that's a carriage house or a granny flat, whatever you want to call it. A secondary
granny flat, I like that.
A secondary living unit that sits back in the alley. And they used to be very popular back before the great rush out to the suburbs. And the new zoning code allows them again, but only in very specific neighborhoods.
And how does that work? Where are the boundaries here?
That's still being determined.
Still being determined. We're still watching sausage being made.
But under the first draft of the code, my neighborhood is not, ADUs are not allowed in my neighborhood. Under the first draft of the code.
ADUs. Now, again, that's another government
detached
word. Carriage house.
Let's call them carriage. They're actually called, they're called accessory dwelling units, but people call them carriage houses or granny flats. And so under the first draft, single unit designated neighborhoods where it's going to be single family detached only aren't allowed carriage houses. They're allowed in mixed use. They're allowed in the neighborhoods that are still going to be allowed duplexes. And so it's a really odd thing because it's almost like we're in the 1950s again. And this is a policy designed to drive people back out into these, these newfangled concepts called suburbs, when the truth of the matter is that the opposite is happening. And so these people who are making this demographic shift demand certain amenities. They're contemporary families. They're usually fairly affluent. they demand a certain a lifestyle. And the problem is the new code is going to take away one lifestyle or one housing option, duplexes.
A very important housing option.
Well, that adds density and adds value to the neighborhood. So the least that the city planners can do is if they're going to take away one option, they can give us another option. So if they take away R2, we could be R1.5, and you could have a single family house and an accessory dwelling.
There really are a ton of options, aren't there? Because if you look at Houston, that has no zoning.
Well, there's just no zoning.
There's no zoning whatsoever. But if I went and did a land use tour there, and it's very fascinating because it's neighborhood by neighborhood, and there's a whole lot of litigation and things going on. But somehow, Houston works, and it is the most affordable major city in the country. And there may be multiple reasons for that, including weather, but zoning certainly has to play a part of that. And then if you look at Arvada, right outside of Denver where I lived, they used eminent domain to kick a bunch of people out. And this gets right to what you were talking about. They put in these lofts, for $1,500 a month, 1 or 2 bedrooms, thinking that there was going to be this massive influx of people. And there just wasn't, because there was a real mismatch between what the demographic in that community wanted and what the government thought the community should want.
Well, in discussion on the duplexes, just don't forget affordability.
Well,
I think that's real important. I mean, you can get a better price on one side of a duplex than you can on a large home. Yeah, they can still move into your Berkeley neighborhood, for example.
Right. Well, there's two things. There's 2 things going on in Berkeley. There's the duplexes that are going
And define
up.
Berkeley in terms of
Berkeley is
streets.
it's northwest Denver, and so you could basically say Berkeley is from Sheridan to Federal, and from 38th to about 46th Avenue. So it's northwest. It's as far northwest as you can go in Denver, basically. And
right by Lakeside Mall, right?
On the other side of
Okay.
on the other side of Sheridan Boulevard from Lakeside, the old Lakeside Mall, which is no longer there.
The Lakeside Mall's not there.
The Lakeside Mall's
how
not
often
there.
I
It's
get out.
gone.
Lakeside Amusement Park.
And so what's happening is that Tennyson Street is supposed to be our pedestrian-friendly business district, where people will walk to go do their things. But the problem is if you simply downzone, if you just do a blanket downzoning, it's an artificial barrier to market-driven density that walkable communities need in order to thrive. And so this is new urbanism 101. A walkable business district needs people who live within walking distance, who will walk
A key component
to the business district and do stuff there. And so, again,
maybe the city will just give everybody Vespas each time
well,
you
you
live
could
in a
have
house.
a Vespa
Cash
would be,
for
a
clunkers,
Vespa,
you could have cash for
a Vespa would be a
Vespas.
great idea. So if you're going to take away one housing option that adds density and value and allows people to move into an urban core neighborhood and have the square footage and amenities they demand, then you need to give one back in return. And so this is my great concern. My great concern is that for instance, my wife is a designer, and instead of her renting space and then having to get into a car and drive to space, I would like to be able to build her a design studio on our property, an accessory dwelling unit, a carriage
That sounds
house.
reasonable. That sounds very
And this
environmentally
is,
friendly.
Again, this is environmentally friendly. It's new urbanism 101.
So what's the opposition argument to that?
Well,
They're concerned in the materials that the opponents are putting out. They're concerned about renters.
right.
Renters. We
Yes.
wouldn't want those.
I mean,
poor people
it's
there.
unbelievable. And I know that the political leanings of these people, I'm frankly shocked by some of the comments that they're making.
It's shocking
It's
that
really
a great many people who would otherwise align themselves with progressive causes are more than willing to say, we don't want a low rent element
Yeah.
moving into our neighborhood. And basically, so an ADU, so if you build a 500 square foot accessory dwelling unit and rent it out, that's going to be a fairly reasonable rent. It's not going to be like renting a whole house. And it's kind of shocking to me. I mean, it is a little shocking, but that's the only argument against them.
Well, no, they're coming up, in fairness, they're coming up about the parking issue.
Well,
it's
parking.
always the parking issue, because everybody thinks, not everyone, but many people think that public street is their own private parking spot.
It's not.
It's not.
I got a ticket yesterday for parking in front of my house on street sweeping day.
I got news for you.
I'm hoping you'll pick it up for me.
The 50 feet in front of my house, we do consider the 50 feet in front of our house to be our parking.
That's right. So you fit.
It's sacred. You put out
right into
cones.
that
Yeah, the valet. That is my husband.